Hello, I am Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905er. This past week, the Toronto Star published a series of articles outlining a history of abuse and mistreatment at the Maplehurst Correctional Facility in Milton, Ontario. Maplehurst is the provincially owned and operated jail housing provincial prisoners. Many of these prisoners are awaiting trial for charges and are presumed to be innocent in the eyes of the law. The Toronto Star reported on a story that occurred on December of 2023 involving the facility's institutional crisis intervention team, strip searching inmates, binding their hands together with zip ties, while being supervised by officers in full tactical gear and pepper ball weapons trained on the immobilized inmates. This was all due to a prisoner striking a guard earlier, and it should be noted that the prisoner was detained and removed from the facility. This incident happened in the context of a history of horrible conditions in Ontario's jails, among which Maplehurst is considered by many to be the worst. 46 inmates died in Ontario jails in 2024, with 12 of them at Maplehurst. An inmate at Maplehurst reported that their toilet in their cell was clogged for so long that they were forced to use a Mr. Noodles cup to go to the bathroom in. Another inmate reported a rash from poor hygiene because they were unable to take regular showers. Inmates at Maplehurst are stacked 3 to a cell when those cells are made for only 2 people. Overcrowding has been a long-standing problem in Ontario jails. However, in recent years, the matter seems to have gotten worse. Ontario's jails are overcrowded and resources are stretched thin, creating a culture in which the aforementioned incident can occur. For a tough-on-crime Ontario government, the Solicitor General, Michael Kersner, who is responsible for Ontario's jails, is seemingly silent on the matter. The conditions, though, are sparking potential charter cases as prisoners are being kept detained before having their day in court while living in inhumane conditions. With the provincial government eager to lay the blame for criminals on the streets due to the bail system, I thought it was prudent to examine whether or not Ontario was living up to its obligations to ensure the timely and humane treatment of the accused. To that end, I have invited onto the podcast the journalist who is covering this story as it develops. Brendan Kennedy is an investigative reporter with 15 years of experience with the Toronto Star. He has been following and reporting on the matter at Maplehurst, as well as Ontario's jails at large. He joins me today. Hey there, it's me, Joel. Welcome back to the podcast that keeps you informed, engaged, and connected to everything happening in the 905 region. Before we dive into today's episode, we want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to our supporters. Yes, that's you, who chip in $5 a month to help keep the 905er podcast going. Your support means we can keep bringing you the in-depth discussions, local analysis, and interviews that matter. Plus, as a supporter, you get access to exclusive bonus content like 905er Extra Minutes, where we go beyond the main episode with additional insights, behind-the-scenes conversations, and extended interviews you won't hear anywhere else. If you're already a supporter, we can't thank you enough. You are the reason we can keep doing this week after week. And if you haven't joined yet, now is the time. It's super easy. Just head over to 905er.ca and click on the supporter tab. For just $5 a month, you get more content, more access, and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping independent media thrive in the 905. So don't wait. Join our community of supporters today. Now let's get on to this week's episode. Thank you, Brendan Kennedy from the Toronto Star, for coming on to talk about this. The week of recording this, he's been publishing 3 stories as of date. I don't know if he has another one in the pipeline on Maplehurst, provincial jail up in Milton. What is starting to emerge of a quite a notorious story. I'm not going to spoil it for our listeners, but Brendan, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm going to let you frame this up because I this is your story. Tell us what you've uncovered has been going on up at Maplehurst.
Yeah, well, like you said, there's been a few different stories. Some of the recent ones have been specifically about Maplehurst and specifically about an incident that occurred in December 2023. So basically, the quick synopsis is that on December 20th, 2023, an inmate punched a guard, sucker punched a guard on the unit, and that inmate was then removed from the jail, charged with assault, taken off the site, taken off the outside of the jail. The rest of the inmates in that moment were locked in their cells, and they remained locked down for the next day. And then the next day after that, December 22nd, 2023, the jail's what they call the Institutional Crisis Intervention Team, so kind of like a internal riot squad for the jail, descended on the unit and carried out a mass strip search of the remaining 192 inmates. And our reporting has shown that this was done as retribution, as kind of a collective punishment of the remaining inmates, even though the inmate who delivered the punch was no longer there. And so I actually wrote the story about what happened last year, and I'd learned then about the existence of a video. And then more recently, we obtained the video from a court in Brantford, and yeah, so we showed portions of the video, what took place, and like I said, there's nothing in the video that I didn't report last year, but there's something obviously very different about when you can see something like this with your own eyes, and you can see, scenes that are, reminiscent of Abu Ghraib or other kind of notorious
Mhm.
prison scandals. You see guys in their underwear with, guards in full riot gear holding, pepper ball guns to them, and with,
I
anyway,
want I want to put a pin in your comment on Abu
yeah.
Ghraib. We're going to come back to that later in the episode. Um, and for our listeners, we are going to have links to Brendan's journalism in our show notes. Please do, once you're done listening to this episode, go take a look at the story. The pictures that you published are astonishing. This is I'm going to try and describe it for our listeners, but the images that you publish are, it's a hallway in the jail, and the prisoners are in basically boxers. It looks like, or basically naked. They have zip ties around their wrists, and they're on their knees, are sitting facing the wall. They are not posing a threat at all. But you have as you said, the crisis unit dressed in body armor, helmets, tactical, looks like tactical gear. And in one photo that you published, it had looked initially, I thought it looked like a gun, but I guess that's the pepper ball.
Yeah,
Pepper,
they
pepper
they look they look just like big
right,
guns, but we understand that to be pepper ball guns.
right. And the one, it looks like it's pointed at one of the inmates. Looks like it's pointed at one of the inmates' head. They're very disturbing images, to say the least. I want in the article you said that the Solicitor General, Michael Kersner, has not responded to this. I'm wondering, has that changed at all? Like, what is the official government response to these images being released?
Yeah, the official government response has been almost nothing. They've sent me boilerplate statements saying that there's investigations ongoing, and there's that there are court cases underway that are affected by this incident. So they say they cannot comment. Michael Kersner has declined repeated interview requests from me going back to last year. He has never addressed this incident publicly. And yeah, so the ministry, Solicitor General has said very little.
As well, I think it's worth pointing out that the Toronto Star had to go to, I believe you said in the article, you said it was a Brantford court to get the court to order this video to be released. The government and Maplehurst wanted this locked away somehow, and you had to go get a court order and the judge saw it and said, this deserves to be public knowledge. The public needs to know what happened here.
Yeah, well, the video became an exhibit in a case of a man who was affected by this. And this is happening across the province where the guys who were the inmates who were affected, they are in a lot of cases filing applications to have their charges stayed or to have their sentences reduced as a result of charter violations that have occurred in this case. And this is one, so I was tracking a number of cases, and the one case in Brantford was one where the video was actually made an exhibit and actually played in open court.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how we obtained it.
Let's use that to segue into my next point. In the article, your initial article on that you posted this week, you quote criminal defense lawyer Alison Craig, who she's representing a client incarcerated in Maplehurst, and she says that this is basically commonplace, or that this has been going on for a while. Um, I'm wondering, in your conversations with her, is she considering any charter, like bring up a charter case on behalf of her client to the courts based on what this evidence has seen, or she seems to say that this is a commonplace feature amongst Ontario jails at the moment. I'm wondering, like, are we looking at a charter violation case being brought forward here?
Yeah, so that's already happened and it's already happening. I will say what happened in this incident in Maplehurst is not common. This is exceptional. What's common are that the conditions are horrific
Mhm.
on a day-to-day basis, and people who spend time at Maplehurst are routinely getting reduced sentences because the conditions are so bad. But this particular incident with the ISIT team, this was not commonplace. This was a very unusual situation. And so she and other defense lawyers going back to last year have been seeking to have charges stayed or sentences reduced on the grounds that the jail violated their client's charter rights in this incident. So, like in the case of Claude Simon, just he's one former inmate. His is the case from which we obtained the video. Um, in his case, he ended up pleading guilty and receiving a reduced sentence and the Crown conceded that it was a bit of a narrow concession, but the Crown conceded that his charter right not to be subjected to unreasonable search had been
Mhm.
violated. He was alleging further violations. He was alleging and he still maintained, and his lawyer maintained, that his charter right not to be subjected to cruel and unusual treatment or punishment, and also that his charter right to life, liberty, and security of the person had also been violated. The Crown did not concede those, but they have conceded elsewhere, again, on the Section 8 unreasonable search.
I I appreciate you making the distinction between that story of the squad being called in, but in your previous article, you did mention that the conditions of Maplehurst are somewhat notorious, in that being one was if I recall correctly, one inmate said that their toilet was clogged, and they end up having to use a Mr. Noodles cup to go to the bathroom in. One inmate claimed that they were developing a rash because they were not able to shower on a daily basis. And if I believe it, because in the incident that you reported in question, a bit of retaliation afterwards, the inmates were returned to their cells, but basically the heat was turned off in December for a few days, kind of as a punishment or whatever have you. And as well, they weren't given new prison uniforms, new jail uniforms. So essentially they're in their underwear for 2 or 3 days in December cold in Milton. This doesn't seem that much like an isolated incident in terms of a culture that we're looking at with the Ontario jails. Am I wrong in viewing that this just kind of seems like an inevitable escalation of that behavior, perhaps, or am I reading too much into this?
No, I mean, I think that's somewhat fair. I mean, I think sort of both things can be true. I mean, on one hand, like I said, like this incident with the internal ride team, the ISA team, that doesn't happen every day. What does happen every day are that at Maplehurst, there's routine triple bunking, so three guys in a cell meant for two, routine lockdowns. So the time that they usually would be out of their cell. They're stuck in their cell. Sometimes they're stuck in their cell for days at a time. So, you can imagine if you're three guys in a cell meant for two and you're locked in your cell, you can't get out for sometimes an entire day, sometimes multiple days in a row. Um, there are issues with hygiene. So there's been multiple complaints about lack of toilet paper, lack of access to showers. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens routinely, and I think Maplehurst arguably has the worst conditions in the province of any provincial jail. But what's happening there is sort of indicative of what's happening across the province. Maplehurst is severely overcrowded. It had the most inmate deaths last year. There are lots of issues there, but I mean this incident was unique. But like I think you are right to say that it does reflect something of a attitude towards inmates. I think would be fair to say, and a culture um, of you know I mean antagonism towards the inmates.
Uh, on that note, in one of your articles, I believe you had Michael Kersner, Solicitor General of Ontario, quoted as saying, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're going to commit a crime in Ontario, we'll find a place for you in these jails. And that kind of struck that struck me as that cavalier attitude of, this government wants to appear to be very tough on crime. We hear about, you know, complaints about bail reform at the federal level. Yet at the provincial level, things like this happen. And I'm wondering, is there a culture, I don't want to say of cruelty, but maybe a bit more maliciousness in the criminal justice system at the provincial level that, if you're here for a reason, so we kind of get to be mean to you. And on that note, I do want to emphasize to our listeners, most of these people have not actually been formally found guilty. They are awaiting trial. They have not been proven guilty in a court of law yet. These are people who are just strictly charged with a crime. They might be innocent.
Yeah, roughly 80%. 4 out of 5 guys in provincial jails are on remand, meaning they're awaiting trial. They haven't been convicted yet. They're legally innocent and they're presumed innocent. And I would add that like that's not just like a nice phrase. That's kind of a fundamental principle of our justice system. And some portion of them will have their charges withdrawn. Some portion of them will be acquitted. And yeah, and I mean, I would say also add like, even if you are found guilty of a crime, I think people would still think that you should be treated humanely by the state. And with regards to the other things you said, just to be clear that the quote that you gave at the start was from one of Mr. Kersner's spokespeople. Her name's Chelsea McGee, and she said something to the effect of what you said, like if you're charged with a crime, we'll find space for you. And yeah, I was surprised by the brashness of that answer that she gave because to me it just flies in the face of what the actual facts are on the ground. Maplehurst, the most recent data that I have is 145% overcapacity. Um, the average across the province is around 130% capacity. So actually, no, they don't have space for people that they put in jail. You can stuff guys in. You could have quadruple bunking if you want, but at some point, you have to decide like if you're going to take on the responsibility of locking people away, I think the people of Ontario expect you to do that humanely, and the judges, like the courts, expect you to do that, and that's why, beyond the specifics of this case, inmates in provincial jails, especially in places like Maplehurst, are routinely getting their sentences reduced because of particularly harsh pretrial conditions, and a lot of that there's multiple reasons for that, but a lot of that has to do with the overcrowding.
That and that like this conversation is going swimmingly because you keep segueing into my next point. uh, and that is like the I read your article and I'm thinking to myself, if I was a criminal defense lawyer of one of these inmates, I'd be just thinking of how many charter violations could I bring up to get my client out. And this is, I mean, this is before might have seen the inside of a courtroom for the crime that they're being charged with. And the other aspect of this, and this is outside of what you were covering, but we know that the court system is underfunded. Listeners of this podcast, we had on Halton Chief of Police Steve Tanner a few weeks ago, and he brought up the fact that their courts are underfunded. There's not enough Crown attorneys to process through the court system in a timely manner. So criminals are being let go because they're not seeing a timely trial. Is there is there a parallel here with they're not getting in front of a court on a timely basis as is their charter right, and they're being kept in these conditions that I could make the argument that that is also a charter violation of indecency, the proper violation there. Is that on anyone's radar in this conversation? I got to imagine that the defense attorneys involved are sitting there going, I'm just writing my briefs and waiting for my day in court.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is sort of kind of an upstream problem to this how long it's taking certain cases to get to court and get through court. And yeah, I mean, there's not necessarily charter violations, but there is something. I don't want to get like too in the weeds here, but basically, you can argue that. I mean, some background. Anyone who spends any time in pretrial detention, so if you don't get bail, you get credited at 1.5 times per day that you, so every day that you spend in pretrial detention is worth 1.5 days of your sentence. So you get
Mhm.
extra credit automatically. Everyone gets that. It's a recognition of the fact that the state has incarcerated you while you've been legally innocent. And then on top of that extra 1.5 credit, if your pretrial detention is particularly harsh, that's the phrase that they use, um, then you can get extra credit on top of that. It's considered like a mitigating factor in your sentencing. So what's happening is that, this is something that used to be used exceptionally, but because of the extent of the lockdowns and the triple bunking and other issues happening in provincial jails, guys are routinely getting this extra credit for their particularly harsh conditions. And yes, as you mentioned, if somebody spends a year in pretrial detention or 18 months in pretrial detention, and the records from the jail show that, of that 18 months, 10 of those months were the person was triple bunked and they were locked down for 300 days out of their time, that is all going to accumulate to a point where they will get a significant sentence reduction. So, maybe somebody who gets sentenced to 5 years is going to have 6 months shaved off or a year shaved off because of these harsh conditions. So yeah, like these have this is not just about treating prisoners humanely, which I think is a worthy enough goal to begin with. But even if you do not care at all about the conditions that prisoners are living, you have no sympathy for them. Even if you are one of those people, then you should still care because it's affecting the sentences that they're getting. It's affecting the justice system, and it has these ripple effects and consequences that I don't think people realize when they consider the value of jail conditions.
I don't know if you can answer this, but do you know what the size of the jail cell at Maplehurst is? Like a standard jail cell?
I do just because I'm working on another story that's about this, and I think the general population at Maplehurst is 7.5 feet by 15 feet. It's smaller in the it's a protective custody area, but I think that the general population cell is 7.5 by 15 by 9 height.
Okay, just to give perspective, I am 6'3". I would barely lay like I would barely fit in that cell. I can
Well,
imagine
yeah, it would be seven
like
and a half wide.
wide by
Yeah,
15 deep,
by
nine
50.
feet
Yes.
tall. But
Yeah.
even still, laying down across that floor, I'm there's not a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
not a lot of give. And
And when there's triple bunking, there's a mattress on the floor.
while I'm picturing three of me
Yeah.
in there, that space gets filled up pretty quick.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, one inmate told me, you sometimes when you're locked in your cell, you try to kill that time by like doing a little bit of exercise that you can in the small space. And he said, when you're triple bunked, you can't even do a push-up. So you've kind
right.
of lost that. One used to be able to do push-ups in your cell, and now you can't even do a push-up. You're just sitting on your bunk.
That's crazy. I sorry, I'm just picturing that in my head, and it's not a pleasant sight.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse, only on Netflix.
In your most recent article, we're recording this on Friday, April 4th, and you published an article today. And there's something that I read in it that I just have to run by you because I thought this was just wild. So the incident that you're talking about with the in Maplehurst with the incident team coming in, the superintendent Winston Wong was seen on the footage patrolling the hallway or supervising what was going on. So he was there. He knew what was. We have it on film. He knew what was going on. In your article, you said one of the inmates quoted him saying, "Welcome to Guantanamo." He says that he denies it, that he said it. But I mean, the images that are in the video, like that's coming back to what we described about Abu Ghraib, but the images do strike you as the images that we've seen in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. We know what went on there. Is that kind of the attitude that maybe the officials running our jails are presenting here? Or are they that cavalier about operating Ontario jails that they can make this joke of it's Guantanamo and feel that they can get away with it?
Well, I can't speak to what they're thinking, but yeah, Winston Wong authorized this search. He's a superintendent, and there are allegations that he and other senior staff were referring to the operation internally as Guantanamo Bay. Um, and yeah, I mean the judge in the case in which we obtained the video, Justice Collect Good, she was particularly offended by these images of Winston Wong fist bumping the correctional officers while walking by a row of inmates, in their underwear with their hands zip tied with pepper ball guns trained on the back of their heads. She found that particularly offensive. And yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that that Claude Simon's lawyer has alleged in court documents that that these officials of the jail took great delight in what they were doing. And when you look at those images, it's hard to dispute that. I think it's clear that um, that they were doing this to send a message, and I think that's what they were trying to get across. I mean, in the very short interview that we did with Winston Wong, he said that, you know, he was trying to do what he had to do to protect those that work under him. So, he saw his
After the incident, though.
yeah, I mean, he saw his correctional officer get punched by an inmate 2 days earlier, and he thought that, this was a way to, I guess, um, gain compliance from the inmates.
But after the inmate in question was removed from the facility.
Yeah, he's not there anymore.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'll leave that stand as it is. What's the reputation that Maplehurst, and let's go a bit broader, that Ontario jails are getting within the legal and judicial community? When you're talking with lawyers and justices, are Ontario jails getting a bad reputation uh, in the industry, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this is something like the condition at Maplehurst, they're likely not well known to the mainstream public, but for anyone who deals with someone who's there, whether it's family or defense lawyers, and judges for sure, these conditions are well known. This goes back, this goes back before the Ford government. The conditions in the jails in terms of lockdowns, overcrowding, understaffing, triple bunking, these are longstanding issues. They're getting worse. That's the thing that's happening now. And I think, judges are increasingly frustrated by this because, they're trying to give someone who's convicted of a crime a fit sentence, and they have to then acknowledge that as part of that fit sentence, they need to take time off because they keep hearing and hearing evidence of such brutal conditions. And judges have tried going back to, there was a case in 2019, I believe, where a judge went so far as to give triple credit, like 3 times credit for pretrial detention because the conditions were so bad. And there's been some cases since then that have changed how judges can give credit. We don't need to get into all that, but judges, when they deliver these sentences, they usually also make really strong comments that are meant to be, the phrase they use is like, "We hope the government takes judicial notice of this." They expect that their commentary is being understood by the authorities, that they will do something about this, but that when you read these decisions, and I encourage people to go to Canley, Canley.ca to check these legal cases. You could search Maplehurst, you can search Maplehurst conditions, you'll find these cases. And the judges are just so exasperated because it has been coming up time and time and time again. There doesn't seem to be anything done about it. So yeah, to answer your question, Maplehurst has a horrible reputation among those who are working around it.
I find that interesting because, again, you step back and the layperson, I should say, coming into this discussion, they would have heard the Ontario government talk about, we need to be tough on crime, and these criminals are getting out on bail and they're just reoffending, and it's this revolving door in the jail system. And I find the story fascinating because it tells me that it's not so much a revolving door as no, it's just broken. Like you're punished even before you're found guilty. And I guess I'm listening to this and I'm wondering, what is the solution to this? Is it just throwing more money at the problem? Is it a cultural re-education? Do we need better training of guards and officials? Do we have to tear the whole thing down and build it from the ground up? What's your take on the solution to this?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I mean, the first thing I would say about the bail issue, there have been a couple of high-profile incidents when people who have gotten bail have then committed very serious crimes, and I think that has led to this idea in the wider public that bail is easy to get. The reality is, bail has become very restrictive, so that's how you have 80% on remand. We've never had that rate of number of inmates on remand before in Ontario. It's been increasingly become a problem, or it's been a problem that's been going on for years, but it's never gotten to this point. So bail is actually quite restrictive. It's quite difficult to get, despite, like I said, those high profile incidents when horrible things happened. But in terms of solutions, I think, you might need to have smarter people than me on the show to talk about that. I'm more pointing out the problems, but I think something that you mentioned, like, do you tear it down? At a place like Maplehurst, it's hard to see how you don't, because I think there is a problem with the culture there. It seems to be, the evidence shows anyway. And in terms of the broader issues, I think that governments, I think, should be thinking about different ways to spend the money that they're putting into jails now as well. And perhaps that money could be better spent in the community and community supervision programs, which are far less expensive than keeping someone in jail. It's quite expensive to keep someone in jail. I think the last time I checked, it was roughly $400 per day per inmate. That is the cost to the province. And I think when you look at these images and you see what's happening in Maplehurst, you have to ask yourself, is this the most effective and efficient use of taxpayer money? Because, when we talk about public safety, we don't often talk about the conditions in jail, but, virtually everyone who's incarcerated today is going to be released sometime, whether that's tomorrow or whether that's in 10 years, they're going to get out. And, I think we should be thinking about what shape they're in when they get out and what kind of experience they're having on the inside and whether there's anything truly rehabilitative happening there. Um, yeah.
I, you mentioned that, and I was remembering in your article, the 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 inmate who kind of sparked this whole discussion that you mentioned, I believe was there because in facing addiction issues, if I'm not mistaken, or
I'm
there,
sorry, which inmate are we talking
I'm
about?
I'm trying I'm going to beg your pardon on this.
Yeah.
In the article, you're talking about the inmates were there because of addiction issues. They go in there to try. They're hoping to get clean, or they're hoping to kick the habit, so to speak, and they're stuck into this miserable conditions. And I'm thinking this is also the government that wants to end all these supervised injection sites, which I wonder if that's going to fuel an even greater crisis down the road of addicts being thrown into jails, such as in Maplehurst. I, I,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I think how that could play out. I mean, nobody's in jail to kick their habit, but they've committed crimes that are often as a result of being addicted to
right,
drugs.
right.
And they remain addicted to drugs when they're in jail. And there's actually the access to drugs in jail is another huge problem. The last year had a record-tying number of deaths in provincial jails. 46 people died in provincial jails last year, which is the same number that occurred in 2021. The last 5 years have been the deadliest in the province's history in terms of inmate deaths. And the main cause of them, roughly 40 to 50% of the deaths, are due to accidental drug overdoses. So the drugs, I mean, and that might be a whole other show about how the drugs get into the jails, but drugs do get into the jails from a variety of sources. And yeah, if you're somebody who is addicted to drugs and you're in a miserable, hostile place and you can find access to the drugs, it's going to be difficult not to use them. Um, so I've lost my way with it where we're
No,
going with this, but
I'm not sure really how to want. It was just as I was reading this, I'm kind of making parallels in my mind to a lot of government policy that I'm worried will fuel this problem. Because I think what it comes down to is a problem of overcrowding. We just have too many people in there and not enough staff and resources to properly deal with them humanely. And in the article you had mentioned about how I believe it was a mother of a former inmate whose son died because they overdosed inside,
yeah,
and
she thought she didn't she could have put herself forward as a surety and he might have been able to get bail if she did, and she decided not to because she thought that that would be a kind of a forced detox, not realizing how much access to drugs there
and
was in jail.
there's a million ways I'm my mind's going like a million miles a minute on this because there's like one thing I've learned doing this podcast. I'm sure you, as you do your work, nothing's in silos. Everything is connected some
Right.
way. And I can picture that mother was trying to do the right thing by her son. She wanted her son to be um, off drugs, and I wonder if I wonder if she thought the thing a lot of people have this misconception of, oh, you go in, you get clean. They have programs in the jails, and you're going to come out and you're going to get clean, and you're going to be rehabilitated and get back on the straight and narrow. And the picture that you're painting me is that it's almost like a process of abandonment. Once you go in, even the government doesn't want to own up to its responsibility of housing and caring for you in their own jail. It is like it's almost like a punishment before guilt. And I'm probably editorializing a bit there, but that's the kind of the picture that I think you're painting there, Brendan. And I'll give you a chance to tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, it's your show. You can say what you want. No, I mean, I do think that one of the people I spoke to for that story about inmate deaths, Kylie Rogers, her brother died at the Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center in 2021. Um, you know, she said that there isn't supposed to be the death sentence in Canada, and yet some of the conditions can lead to that in provincial jails, and that the punishment is to be separated from the community. The punishment is to be separated from your family. You're not then supposed to be further punished with inhumane conditions. That's not
Mhm.
part of what the judge sentenced you to. So yeah, I think that that what you said was I think a fair take.
I guess I'll leave it at that because I don't think you or I have the pay grade to fix this problem. But is there, are you seeing any changes as you're discussing this with criminal defense lawyers, with people in the system, people in the bureaucracy? Are you seeing any chance of a reform happening, or is it going to take a bit more public pressure to bring this to light and to really drive a case for more humane treatment of jail prisoners in Ontario?
Yeah, I don't think there's any everyone I speak to says it's only getting worse. It was bad before and it's worse now. And they see no hope for things improving unless there's a big significant change or the significant, political will. And like conditions in jails is not like a typically an election platform policy, or it's not something that's popular in that regard. And sometimes people don't necessarily have sympathy for prisoners, but I would say that no matter where you are on the political spectrum, I think that you should care about improving conditions in provincial jails. Because if you're somebody who's more oriented towards social justice, and you think that prisoners deserve to be treated humanely, whether or not they've been convicted, whatever they did, they should be treated, they have human rights that should be respected, then obviously, you will be outraged by what happened in this case at Maplehurst and outraged by the conditions in provincial jails across the province. But even if you're somebody who does not care at all about prisoners, if you have no sympathy for them whatsoever, and if you don't care about the conditions that they're living in, and you'd be happy if they were in total squalor, the reality is that, unless you're going to do away with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, judges are going to continue to give inmates shorter sentences as a result of this, or in some cases, potentially stay their charges altogether. So if you're somebody who, considers themselves tough on crime, law and order oriented, that kind of thing, you should still care about raising these conditions up to a humane level so that they can serve their full sentence, so that, also in a lot of cases, guys are getting out after time served, once they reach trial, and they never even if they would have been sentenced to more than 2 years, they're never spend any time in a federal penitentiary, where there's actually, they have their problems too, but there's actually some level of programming there that could lead to some rehabilitation. You know, right now, the provincial jails in the province are like, miserable warehouses. And I just think that, when we think of public safety, we should also be thinking about, you know, in what state are the guys that when they get released from jail, in what state are they going to be in? And I think, and what effect does that have on public safety? These people will be part of our communities again. So I think we need to really think about like how they're treated when they're inside, so that when they get outside, it's not going to be a constant cycle of crime again.
I'm going to leave it on that note for this episode. Thank you very much, Brendan Kennedy, for coming on to talk with this. A story that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. Thank you very much for the great work that you do read. Again, folks, links will be in the show notes. Please go read the story and follow along as it develops. Thank you very much once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Are your poor communication skills holding you back from being the leader you know you can be? The Master Communicator is a podcast that can help you improve your communication skills in just a few minutes a week. I'm David Tyler, a broadcaster and communication coach, and each week I deliver bite-sized masterclasses for busy leaders like you. Each episode is packed with practical techniques and strategies to help you navigate challenging conversations, delivering impactful messages, and inspire your team. Whether you're looking to enhance your executive presence, build a culture of trust, or simply lead with more confidence, the Master Communicator is your go-to resource. Subscribe now and start your journey to becoming the leader you were meant to be. Transform your communication skills, one episode at a time.
I'm Jeff Woods, and I'm shining a light on music and the rock stars who make it.
He just was one of those people, he stood out.
He was a magic guy. He really was a magic guy. We all have faults. He had the same amount of faults as we all had.
This was before Led Zeppelin. Robert was full on. I mean, he was Led Zeppelin without the band behind him. He had the hair, the jeans, the whole thing, you know, and he was amazing.
The Records and Rockstars podcast, heard around the world and yours to hear wherever you get podcasts. All the episodes from jeffwoodsradio.com.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.